What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 7 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Baltimore Ravens. Before we get started, if you could take a moment to please hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy way to truly support my channel in a meaningful way. It tells YouTube to push this video out to more viewers, which is big for me. Really appreciate it. While you're down there, also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these deep dive team reveals as we lead up to the number 1 team. And check out the first link in the description there. Got some big news just around the corner here related to TFG merch. So that will be coming soon. You can check out that link, see what we got coming. But let's go ahead and get into the Baltimore Ravens, who are really looking for a major bounce back season. A team that was entirely snake bitten by injuries last year. It felt like every single day we were getting heartbreaking news on this team, and they were really forced to play left-handed, lean onto not just the depth of their team, but the depth of the depth. And they still went 8-9. They still had a pretty solid season, but man, we're talking about star players. Ronnie Stanley, their first round pick. Rashad Bateman took a while to get healthy. Both starting running backs for the most run-heavy team in the league. Lamar Jackson in the second half of the season was either playing hurt or missing time. Their defense, their secondary was depleted like nothing I can remember. So really hoping for better health this year and a much better season. And ranking number 7 here in my rankings coming into the year is going to be a little bit higher than people expect. I'm definitely optimistic for this team. And it's not just because they're getting all these guys back healthy and that I think people are sleeping on the amount of players that they are returning and the amount of, I guess, team identity that they're going to be able to restore with those star players returning this year. But on top of that, it was a really exciting offseason for this Ravens team as well that I think gives you a lot of optimism that they can basically I guess prove this number 7 ranking correct and have an outstanding season, not just be a playoff contender, but a team that can hopefully compete and win the AFC North, which is easier said than done, and potentially beyond that, as I will have them ranked in the Super Bowl tier. But let's go ahead and start by taking a look at this team's offseason that was really, really busy. One of the more just massive off seasons as far as players moving around here. And not just that, coach movement as well, as they are going to let Wink Martindale go, their longtime defensive coordinator there, and bring back Mike McDonald, who's basically an internal hire here, who did a study abroad program at Michigan for a year, but making some changes with their staff that I will hit on momentarily, but some massive roster turnover here, and it makes sense because they had to go to so much depth. So you have some big departures really on the offense. Marquise Brown getting traded away on draft day for a first-round pick, and a pair of offensive linemen who started last year, Alejandro Villanueva and Bradley Bozeman. But beyond that, just a long list of either low-level starters or depth pieces that did end up playing significant snaps last year, but really not major losses because they were backups last year that had to play starting reps. So Sammy Watkins, Devontae Freeman, Latavius Murray on the offense, and then defensively a ton of pieces here. Justin Ellis, a veteran defensive tackle. Jalen Ferguson, rest in peace, tragically died this offseason. They lose him on the edge. Pernell McPhee on the edge as well, another veteran. Getting more into the back end of the defense, Chris Board played a lot of snaps at linebacker. Anthony Averett was flushed into a starting role at corner. Tavon Young, starting slot corner. Jimmy Smith, rotational corner. And Deshaun Elliott would have been listed as a big departure, except he was one of those players that missed most of last season due to injury. So a lot of names from last year on the way out, but an even larger list of additions. This team did not sit back and just be content with the fact that they're getting guys back healthy. No, they attacked this roster in a big way. So you get both of those running backs back, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. They're going to be a big piece of the run game. But addressing the offensive line as well, bringing in Morgan Moses, who they hope will be an upgrade over what Alejandro Villanueva was for them. They hope to get Ronnie Stanley back, their superstar left tackle. And then they go and get Tyler Linderbaum in the first round of the draft. So reloading the offense and then reloading the defense. Bringing back Michael Pierce after he had a study abroad program in his own right in Minnesota. He comes back. They pick up David Ojabo, ultra explosive edge player out of Michigan in the second round. Reports are good that he will hopefully be able to play at some point for them this year. That could be huge. Marcus Peters missed all of last season. Their number 2 corner, he comes back. They go and get Kyle Fuller to patch up that secondary. In a position where they lost Tavon Young and Jimmy Smith. They go get Marcus Williams, a big name safety signing there, and Kyle Hamilton in the first round, on top of a list of smaller additions, getting Nick Boyle back healthy, maybe the best blocking tight end in the league. If he wasn't a major injury concern moving forward, he would be listed as a big addition. They get some running back depth and Mike Davis, receiver depth, and Demarcus Robinson this week. In the draft, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kolar patching up that tight end group. Daniel Falele, a massive developmental tackle in the 4th round. On the defensive side of the ball, stealing Travis Jones on the D-line in the 3rd round. They bring in Brent Urban, veteran defensive tackle. Steven Means, a rotational scheme fit who played for Dean Pease last year, very familiar with this system. And to top it all off, more cornerback talent, bringing in one of my favorite sleepers in this draft, Jalen Armour Davis. So that is a mouthful of an offseason, and I think it's very clearly a net positive with all of the moves this team made, but not just on paper, in the positive as far as the exchange of talent goes. Obviously, you look at this list and say, yeah, they attacked this thing. They got better on paper. The exchange of talent is in the green for them. They're in the positive as far as getting better on paper. But as I mentioned earlier, they didn't just sit back and say, okay, well, we're getting some of these key players back healthy. Let's run this thing back. No, they really looked themselves in the mirror and said, who are we as a Ravens team? What are our strengths that we can continue to get better at? And they looked around the league and said, well, everyone's kind of going with this spread, small ball approach. Even our fans are saying, please get us receivers, open up the passing game with Lamar Jackson. And they said, no, let's stay true to ourselves, and we're going to become the bullies of the NFL. We're not going to be able to get into shootouts with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in the AFC. No, let's dictate our own terms with run game and defense and dominating the line of scrimmage, and let's double down on our offensive scheme that our fan base is so down on, and realize the strengths that Greg Roman's offense and this heavy run approach can take when you have a player the talent of Lamar Jackson. And especially their draft, but their offseason as a whole really tells you what they want to do. And it's come out in big packages and be the bullies of the NFL. And I really respect that. Kind of zig when the rest of the league is zagging. And I can't wait to see how it plays out. But we are going to talk a little bit more about this we're going to talk a little bit more about this staff in general, what the schemes are going to look like here on both sides of the ball. So at the top of all of this, you have John Harbaugh, who is really well respected around the league as one of the best leaders and CEO type of head coaches in the league. He's done such a great job of empowering both his coaches and his players. I think everybody understands that they have a job to do, and as long as they do it well, Harbaugh is going to let them thrive. And it just establishes this excellent culture across the board. Not only do you have really smart, empowered coaches and players, but it embraces this next man up mentality and allows everybody to really step up and contribute. So I really like the culture he establishes. Everyone in this locker room respects and listens and trusts John Harbaugh. So he's one of the better head coaches in the league, even if he doesn't have that hands-on approach with the offense or defensive side of the ball. He is kind of the CEO of this team, And he's a guy that has recently won a Coach of the Year award, and rightfully so. He is one of the best head coaches in the league, ranking 6th for me. But that does mean that the offensive and defensive coordinators have a lot of power here, and their contributions to this team are potentially more important here than they would be in other situations where the head coach is going to have their hands on either the defense or the offense. Harbaugh is fairly unique in that way. So let's start on the offensive side of things, as Greg Roman is going to be back here for another year in Baltimore, much to the chagrin of a lot of Ravens fans who have really been getting out the pitchforks, looking around the league, seeing these spread offenses, seeing Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen lighting up scoreboards with their arms, saying, you know what, enough of the play action, the gimmicks, and the read options. We want to open this thing up and let Lamar Jackson thrive as a passer. And I get it. There's some frustrations there. In fact, I rank the Ravens dead last in the league for pass game coaching. I understand that. There's some frustration there. And there will be games where the defense and the game flow gets away from them and they have to play left-handed, and it can look pretty ugly when they have to do that. And I understand that that's a fallback of this team. But I cannot blame them for looking back at this team's last few years, where 2020, 2021, I do think they tried to open things up a little bit for Lamar. Granted, they of course stayed often true to that heavy read option Greg Roman offense, but I think that they tried a little bit to open the passing game up, get some more receivers in here, and on early downs potentially go to a little bit more traditional passing game stuff. And granted, they've had a lot of injuries here. I think they look back and say, you know what? We were at our best in 2019 when Lamar Jackson won an MVP, when we let Greg Roman run his offense through and through. We stayed in 12 personnel, 13 personnel. We ran this offense through our tight ends, through our quarterback with his feet, and a really effective run game where Mark Ingram was awesome that year. And they're saying, let's double down on that offense, 2019. And they go out and they draft Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar and Tyler Linderbaum. They trade away Marquise Brown, who really has no business in that offense. So, like it or love it, this is what the Ravens want to do. And honestly, I respect it. Yes, there is a limited ceiling with this offense, because if they can't dictate terms and play with great defense and run the ball effectively, they can't get off of that. And they haven't repped the traditional passing game. And Greg Roman is not a great play designer as far as the passing game goes. But on top of that, let's be real. Lamar Jackson is not a great perimeter passer. He is at his best on RPOs, on play action, attacking the middle of the field where these tight ends can thrive, and a receiver like Rashad Bateman can thrive. So, this is the scheme. Like it or love it, Baltimore. You're going to get as much 12 personnel, as much 13 personnel as they can run. You're going to get a heavy dose of read options, Lamar on the ground, attacking the ball over the middle of the field off of play action. And you couldn't ask for a better offensive coordinator than Greg Roman for that scheme. This is the guy that made Colin Kaepernick unstoppable. He's done it before here in Baltimore. His scheme, when it's working from a run game perspective, is about as good as it gets. So they actually rank second for me for run game coaching, 32nd though for pass game coaching. The biggest split and difference, and honestly, this team right here is the reason I have different splits for pass game and run game coaching, because just ranking them 16th didn't really do it justice. So a truly unique approach here, and they're doubling down on it, man. Defensively, I'm really excited to see what they're going to do this year as well. And they actually rank 5th there for me, despite some unknowns with Mike McDonald coming in. And if any team in the league has proven that they can groom their own talent, hire from within, and that they know what they're doing from a staff personnel, it is John Harbaugh and the Ravens. So when they hire Mike McDonald, who spent 6 years here in Baltimore as a young interim coach growing up, interim coach intern coach, excuse me, not interim, young coach. This dude's 35 years old now, so he was like 27 when he first started working for the Ravens. Worked his way up as a position coach to then go and work for Jim Harbaugh's Michigan Wolverines for a year. And now he's back here at 35 years old as the defensive coordinator. I have no doubts that they know what they're doing here because they let Wink Martindale go, who was already viewed as one of the better defensive coordinators in the league. And McDonald is going to have an incredible support system here of all of the assistants with John Harbaugh, who does have defensive prowess about him. They are going to have everything around him to really allow this defensive staff to not just resume as one of the best defensive coaching staffs in the league, but potentially thrive at an even higher level because you have Mike McDonald, who I think is going to bring in a much more modern thinking approach to this defense and maybe get away a little bit, if not a lot of it, from that attacking, blitzing 3-4 defense that this team has become so familiar with. And, you know, we're going to definitely learn more about how good he is as a defensive coach and more importantly, what his scheme is going to look like as the season starts here. But I do expect this defense to look a lot different. I think we're going to see a lot more 4-3 or 4-2 fronts where you're putting those edge players with their hand in the dirt, something they did a lot of at Michigan. But they ran a lot of hybrid fronts at Michigan. From a coverage perspective, I do think they still will like to run cover 1, cover 3. We saw a lot of single high stuff at Michigan. I think that all is going to stay the same here. This was very much a single high team last year, but maybe a little bit more of that modern split safety stuff. Rotate into cover 2 a little bit more, cover 4, cover 6. Vary those coverages a little bit more so that this defense can evolve a little bit more than I don't want to say they've been stagnant, but the Ravens' defensive scheme has been that attacking 3-4 front for feels like decades at this point. So it's going to be a different looking, more methodical defense than we've seen in years past. And the sky is the limit for Mike McDonald, who might be an ascending head coach candidate before too long if he does a good job here. So I really think they have the right guys in charge. You have your CEO head coach. You have your really offensive guru who is the identity of this team. And Mike McDonald coming in as one of the ascending defensive minds in the football world, really. So very, very promising staff here that is obviously going to be a big reason the Ravens rank 7th and potentially a little bit higher than some people realize. But now let's get into the roster and start breaking down the players here, how all these moving parts are going to fit with this team. And that's going to start with the quarterback room in this offense, where they rank 11th for me. And the beauty of splitting up both the quarterback as a part of the passing game and the quarterback as a part of the run game with my QB run multiplier is we can really cater to the true impact someone like Lamar Jackson has. Because as we look ahead to the kind of run game and the running backs here, Lamar Jackson obviously ranks first in the league as far as QB run multiplier, and this all plays into Greg Roman's scheme and how well they use him as a designed runner. That's a 10% boost to the run game is the max for a QB run multiplier that I'm willing to apply. So even though I may rank him as the 11th best quarterback as far as him as a passing threat to this team, it's what he brings as a runner that makes him an MVP candidate, one of the straight up best football players in the entire world, and someone that is rightfully so about to get paid about $50 million a year, and he's asking for fully guaranteed. I think he's going to get that or something close to that. So I do think this series does a great job of adding some nuance to the Lamar Jackson conversation. Now, as a passer, he is not a perfect quarterback. He really does have some distinct flaws in his game as a passer, and it's really pertaining to his ability to utilize the perimeter of the field in the passing game. There's a reason they traded away Marquise Brown. There's a reason Marquise Brown didn't really want to be here anymore as much as he likes Lamar Jackson. There's a reason they've struggled to get some of these wide receivers to truly develop here. And there's a reason they don't put an emphasis on the wide receivers here. Because outside the numbers, say 20 plus yards downfield, Lamar is genuinely one of the worst quarterbacks in the league as far as accuracy and reading that part of the field. It's just a hole in his game as a passer that I think has been very distinctly identified at this point. Now, can he improve in that just as he's improved in all the other areas as a passer? Sure, but we have not seen that yet, and it's not something I'm counting on moving forward. Now, the rest of his game as a passer is really good. You know, he still ranks as the 11th true quarterback for me in the league because he's good at reading defenses. He's not perfect, but pretty damn good. He can get through his progressions quickly, make good decisions with the football. He's really accurate throwing over the middle of the field, and it's not just in the intermediate game. He is actually really accurate hitting those deep posts and pushing the ball downfield that way. He's elite in the play action game. He can fake that handoff or fake read option or whatever it may be that they're doing here. He can do that while he processes the coverage and make a good decision on that first read, which is easier said than done off of play action when there's a ball handling aspect to it. And that's a whole nother thing that we don't often talk about with quarterbacks. His quick release, his deceptiveness, obviously he's a great athlete, but there is something to be said about his ability to understand when to keep, when to hand off, how to, just literally fake the handoff while he reads defenses. That's an aspect to his game that's really unique and powerful as a quarterback. So, yes, he has flaws as a passer, but he's pretty damn good at it. And then you have to also add on top of that what he adds as a scrambler, where when he decides to run, it's terrifying. And he forces defenses to keep a spy on him, to keep contained, and that obviously adds some different problems for defenses as well. So he ranks 11th for me as a quarterback and number 1 as far as that QB run multiplier, which if you want to talk about QB value and who the best quarterback in the league is, it's obviously a unique conversation, but that would slide Lamar up a little bit, right? And then behind him, you have one of the more fascinating young backups in the league, Tyler Huntley, who stepped in and really played nicely in relief of Lamar Jackson when he got hurt last year. Really had some tough games, won some games for this team, and did it with his arm. And it's really the accuracy with him that really holds Tyler Huntley back. Not entirely unlike Lamar Jackson, but Huntley doesn't have the arm talent or the athleticism that Lamar has. But really makes sense as a backup. He is an athletic guy that can basically allow you to keep the playbook the same. If anything happens to Lamar Jackson, you can still run a lot of the read option and play action passes. So, he makes sense as the backup here. But if unfortunate circumstance would force him into more action, he's someone that I think has shown really nice flashes that could be someone other teams maybe want to take a look at as a potential starter, or at least someone to come in and kind of compete, kind of in that, the Matt Flynn's and the Mike Glennons and those quarterbacks that are brought in with another option to maybe compete for a starting job on a decent contract. Definitely someone that's in that territory as a young player that you got to keep an eye on. So there's your quarterback conversation. And then with the wide receiver room and just the weapons in general, which is really important to state here because of the way this offense operates, they rank 24th for me in the league. And that might sound high for some people because this is genuinely one of the worst and certainly one of the thinnest group of wide receivers in the league. But you have to remember that is intentional, right? Think of everything we've said to this point. They really do not give a shit how good these receivers are outside the numbers, because if they're able to dictate what they want to do, that's not where the ball is going to go. And when you look at their top 3 receivers here, Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, even then, they all do their best work over the middle of the field. That's what they've shown in the NFL and what they've shown going back to their college tape, which you kind of have to lean on here because these guys are all pretty unproven. But they're all going to play that unique role within this offense where they're going to be asked to run block, where Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay are pretty solid at it. They're going to be asked to run deep digs, post routes, crossing routes, slants. That's going to be the primary emphasis here. And Rashad Bateman is excellent at that. Devin Duvernay is excellent at that. Now, you can critique these guys as deep threats and their functional ability to separate deep down the field. Again, they're going to have their limits within this passing game in the true drop back game. But when they're able to live in those heavy packages where it's oftentimes only one of these guys on the field, and it's going to be Rashad Bateman most of the time, these guys are going to be able to operate really well within those play calls that they're going to run. So I hate to keep reminding Ravens fans that this idea that they desperately needed wide receivers is overstated, but it's just deeper explanation for how this is going to work and why I'm not necessarily so worried about it. But on a more individual level, I really do think Rashad Bateman is going to have a massive season here. Was slow getting out the gate last year because of a camp injury, but he was really pro-ready coming out of Minnesota, a true first-round talent who I think is just getting started here. And even by the time he got healthy last year, it was Tyler Huntley, right? So we have not even seen yet healthy Rashad Bateman with healthy Lamar Jackson for any extended period of time. And I think the chemistry and relationship between these guys is going to be really explosive. And I already kind of mentioned what he does well and how he fits within this scheme. But if you want to talk about raw stats and fantasy football, I'm definitely high on Rashad Bateman. He is going to eat up a large chunk of the wide receiver targets here. And you're going to see a million times this year, Lamar Jackson's he's going to fake play action or he's going to boot out, and you're going to see Rashad Bateman with easy separation on a deep dig, on a deep crossing route, or even on a deep post where he does have some sneaky speed, and Lamar is going to hit him consistently. I think Rashad's going to be a consistent 6-7 receptions a game for 80-plus yards and probably a touchdown more often than not because of how well he fits inside this offense. And he's going to have a great year. Now, we are just getting started here. I can't rate him too highly coming into the year, but I'm very optimistic about what he's going to bring for this team. Then you have Devin Duvernay, who, again, is a really good fit here. And they haven't really tapped into Devin Duvernay and all his strengths quite yet, but I do think that they believe in him. And that to me is evident by the fact that they traded away Marquise Brown and are counting on him to get a bigger workload here. Duvernay was kind of a gadget slot piece coming out of Texas, someone that does his best work not just in the short to intermediate game, but also on jet sweeps, sometimes used as a running back and bubble screens. And he's going to provide that aspect to this gimmick offense, if you will. He's going to be another piece that defenses have to keep an eye on, kind of provides another numbers advantage with pre-snap motion and the fact that if he's out there in the slot, he could be a bubble screen threat. You have to keep that backside wing player accountable for Devin Duvernay. So it just adds another read aspect to this offense, someone that's really good with the ball in his hand, and another guy that I think is trending up and going to have a good year this year. And then you have James Prochet, who is a really nice route runner, someone that has had limited opportunities because they have had a lot of bodies in front of them, but was a nice pick when they made it. And I think for Prochet, he's going to be a bigger threat in those more traditional drop back situations. Really good from the slot, but I think he can play outside as well. Smooth route runner, and someone that doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world, but someone that could have a nice year as this team's wide receiver 3. Then they also bring in Demarcus Robinson, who's a great fourth piece to have. Nothing more, nothing less, but I do like the signing to provide some more depth. And then I really liked Tylan Wallace as well. And I think in a different situation, he may have already broken out, but this is kind of the worst case scenario for Tylan Wallace, where he is a perimeter vertical threat, someone that works the sidelines well, that relies on well-placed deep balls, but also really good placement on those kind of back shoulders, those timing routes, those hitch routes, where again, Lamar is just not very good. So I think Tylan Wallace has good football ahead of him, but as far as how they view him and how he fits on this offense, let me just say I'd rather a team go out and trade for Tylan Wallace, but I do think he's a talented player who I really liked as a third-round pick. Then you've got a bunch of undrafted types competing for depth. Mekhi Polk especially is fascinating. Kind of a really slender but tall ball winner type. Doesn't have a lot of speed or route running prowess, but really good ball skills. Someone to, I guess, keep an eye on if he can make this team as a sixth wide receiver. Slade Bolden, also a slot type out of Alabama, who I liked. So some fascinating undrafted types, but probably not going to make much of a name for themselves this year. Now, you might be saying, well, what the heck? That's like the worst group of weapons in the league. How are they ranking 24th? Mark Andrews is the answer. Do not forget that Mark Andrews is literally this team's number one wide receiver. He is going to dominate the target share. In the offense that they want to run, living in heavy personnel, he is going to be the first read, he's going to be the primary weapon, and the best weapon on the wide majority of their passing downs, actually on every single play of their passing downs, because he is a legitimate elite tight end that has only gotten better year in, year out. He even continued to produce when Tyler Huntley stepped in as the quarterback. And beyond that, he's added an awesome blocking element to his game. So I really think in an offense that is going to run their offense through their number one tight end, living in 12 personnel and 13 personnel, and passing over the middle of the field off of play action where Lamar is at his best, Mark Andrews could very well fully take the claim as the number one tight end in the NFL. And I thought he made a case for it last year. But if they can stay healthy and really do what they want to do here, Mark Andrews could have one of the most productive seasons of any receiver in all of football this year. So he's outstanding. 6'5", 250 pounds, sneakily one of the fastest tight ends in the league, one of the best after the catch, a great pair of hands, good route runner, you name it. He is straight up uncoverable and the focal point of this offense. So no, it's not a perfect situation. And yes, I do have to take into account that when they get into those traditional drop-back situations, they're not going to have the answers that a lot of other teams have. And that's accounted for here, right? Their ranking 24th is not some crazy endorsement of this team, but I think there's a lot of people that will rank the Ravens with maybe the third or fourth worst group of weapons in the league. And this is a good enough group for this team to operate at a very high level as long as they can dictate terms and play the style of offense that they want to run. So Mandrews is obviously a big part of that. But I also have to throw Nick Boyle out there because if he's healthy, and that is a relatively big if at this point, he's going to see a large amount of snaps on passing downs. Now, it's not that he's going to see a bunch of targets or, be a true weapon here. It's more the opposite. It's more like indicating that, yes, he's going to be out there a lot, and he's not much of a weapon. You can basically cover him with any linebacker or even defensive ends, and they can run with him and get in his way. Now, if he's schemed open, he can catch the ball. He's decent after the catch. But for the most part, he's not an asset in the passing game. He's more out there because he might be the best run-blocking tight end in all of football. But for that reason, in this offense, he is going to see a lot of time. So you have to mention him. And then we also get to talk about these two rookies. And these two draft selections of Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar really signaled that this team wants to live in 12 personnel and oftentimes be out there in 13 personnel. I think this team is going to lead the league in a landslide as far as tight end snaps across the board. And I was a huge Charlie Kolar fan, but by the looks of it, we actually have to talk about Isaiah Likely first, who was drafted, yes, in the same round, but after Charlie Kolar. And he's dominating camp and preseason, and you always have to be careful with camp hype, but he's a player that was really viewed as a second, maybe early third-round talent who tanked his status in the pre-draft process. Didn't really show out at the Senior Bowl, and honestly ran a really poor 40 time. His weight was an issue, all of it, and he fell into the fourth round. But his tape was really fun, and his role here is going to be really unique. I really think you could probably list him more as a receiver in this offense. Honestly, I think he's going to play the majority of his snaps as a big slot receiver. And I really debated whether I wanted to put him at tight end or wide receiver for this graphic here. But I'll put him at tight end because they will line him up on the wing. They might even have him, motioning in and out as an H-back, as a fullback, so to speak. Because he is a good lead blocker. He's a willing blocker on the move. And if he can meet linebackers and safeties, he can block decently well. As an inline guy, he's freaking terrible because he is built mostly like a receiver. There are receivers in this league who outweigh and are bigger than him. So he straight up looks like a wide receiver. If you just look at him on film, you would say he's a 6'2", 220-pound guy. He's listed at 235. I don't know about that. I think he's going to play at about 230. So he's just going to be the kind of ideal mismatch problem, which this offense is built around, right? So when he's out there, it could be 13 personnel, or, if you're putting him out there with Mark Andrews or whatever, it could be technically 11 personnel, depending on how they want to line these guys up. And they're going to be able to do a bunch of different stuff and really let him thrive in the receiving game at what he does well. And that's quick route running, short routes, and intermediate route running, where he can run outs. He can even run posts over the middle of the field. He can stretch the seam. He can run deep digs. Whatever you want to do with him, he's going to be able to thrive inside this offense. And they seem to be leaning towards him over Charlie Kolar here. So he's trending up. He's definitely someone to keep an eye on here. And he just might be this team's number 2 wide receiver this year. But then you have Charlie Kolar, who at this point in time does not look like we're going to see a lot of him. And it's kind of tough to know exactly where he's going to fit in here. And I honestly like Charlie Kolar much more in a spread offense, to be honest, because he really works well in space, and he's kind of a glorified wide receiver in his own right. And I thought maybe they'd use him in pretty much all the ways we just described Isaiah Likely. But clearly they prefer Likely's functionality inside the offense that they want to run. So Kolar, it's going to be kind of wait and see. I definitely recommend going back to my tight ends video to see me just rave about Charlie Kolar. I compared him to Travis Kelce in a lot of ways. I didn't have a ceiling quite as high, but the way he plays, the way he moves and attacks the football with his size, it's Travis Kelce-esque. So maybe he's a project that maybe beefs up a little bit, learns to block a little bit better, and can actually be more of a Nick Boyle replacement as a more functional tight end 2 within this offense. But I don't see that happening quite this year. So we'll just have to keep an eye on how they want to use him and what he wants to do. It does not look like we're going to get this incredible Charlie Kolar rookie season that I maybe thought we might see in a different landing spot. But I still love him as a player. Then you have some veteran guys, Josh Oliver, Tony Poljan. We'll see if they even make the team. I don't think there's a whole lot there. Then with the receiving backs, a lot of players to talk about here. You get J.K. Dobbins back, who I think was just starting to kind of unearth what he can be as a receiving back. An explosive player that has underproduced as a receiving back at this to this point in his career, going back to Ohio State. So we'll see what they can get there. Gus Edwards, a big-bodied thumper, not much of a receiving back. Mike Davis, definitely very skilled and experienced as a receiving back, but not the most explosive guy out of the backfield. The guy to really keep an eye on for me is Tyler Beatty, who they also drafted. Was he 4th round or 6th round? I can't remember, but I really like Tyler Beatty. I thought the difference between him and James Cook out of Georgia, who the Bills drafted in the 2nd round, was literally like minuscule. I had Cook above him, but almost identical grades. Beatty's really an experienced receiving back and runs good routes, good hands, good after the catch. They do like their scat backs. Lamar Jackson is not afraid to dump it down to these guys in like third and intermediate situations. And Tyler Beatty can really have a role inside this offense if they want to turn to him. Justice Hill, you can kind of say similar things about, but he's had a hard time staying on the field and becoming a reliable player for them. So maybe Beatty is the next man up there. But Beatty's definitely someone to keep an eye on as a third down weapon for them. That was another good draft pick, in my opinion. So that was a lot of time on these weapons, but you kind of really have to dive into how these guys are going to be used and why it's not just a situation where these guys won't hold them back, but when they want to do what they want to do and run those play action heavy, 12 personnel offenses, these guys have defined roles, and their strengths really play in well with how they're going to be used here. So it all makes sense to me, and I'm excited to see these guys put it to the field here this year. But then, of course, if you're going to run a run-heavy offense, it's important to have the right guys up front, and I really think they do. They rank 8th for me for run blocking, 12th for me in terms of pass blocking, which is actually a lot better than the group they've had in the past. And I think from a pass protection standpoint, that is where, when you need to go to those drop back situations, that is something that I think will help them be better there than they have been in maybe the last couple of years, giving Lamar a little bit more time to get the ball to these receivers. Because Lamar does like to hang in the pocket if he can, and that's been an issue for these guys. So from left to right, you hope to get your superstar left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, back. Really unfortunate that he couldn't get healthy and get out there last year. It's very similar to what's going on with David Bakhtiari in Green Bay. Bakhtiari just came off the PUP for Green Bay. Hopefully soon that will happen for Ronnie Stanley, but it's definitely a major question mark for this team if he can't go. Now, that's why it's really nice that they have Ja'Wuan James as insurance, if you can even call him that. Ja'Wuan James has never been able to stay healthy, but you go back to what I said about Ja'Wuan James in their deep dive last year. I was raving about their foresight to pick him up for nothing, someone that was going to have to basically take a redshirt year, if you will, in Baltimore. But looking out ahead of time, this team is so good at forecasting their future needs. Well, it's not necessarily a need, but to have Ja'Wuan James, who just a couple years ago was paid handsomely to be a starting offensive lineman in this league, to have him here for free is a huge asset. So if Stanley isn't quite ready to go and they want to take their time getting him back, you have a more than functional backup there in Ja'Wuan James. Then at left guard, you're going to get good left guard play, whether it's Ben Powers or Ben Cleveland. Both these guys can really play. They've kind of flirted with both these guys, and both are solid run blockers, but Ben Powers has been the more reliable pass protector, so it looks like it's going to be him. I like Ben Powers. I think he can continue to grow slightly and cement himself as a starting caliber guard, a balanced player. But Ben Cleveland pushing him and driving that competition right behind him. I loved Ben Cleveland in the draft last year. A true freak of an offensive lineman, a solid athlete, but really huge size. This guy is a mammoth of a human being. So you have really two-way depth at left tackle, two-way depth at left guard. And if Ben Cleveland can continue to improve that pass protection technique, which I think he will, still a young player, trending upwards, he can be the right guard of the future as you project outwards to eventually losing a 32-year-old Kevin Zeitler, right? So love that future planning. Tyler Linderbaum should be ready to go at center. I think as a pass protector, he might have some hiccups and might even just be physically limited as you project out long term. A shorter guy with shorter arms and a lighter player who, if he gets one-on-one with some of the bigger defensive tackles in this league, he might get overwhelmed by power, just as we've seen from some of these lighter, wide zone players. But I think he's more Jason Kelce than he is, say, Bradbury for the Vikings, where he has such great core strength and technique that he can limit his liabilities in pass protection to at least be good in that area, to the point where you're not really worried about it, especially when he can become an elite run blocker and one of the best run blockers in the entire league, regardless of position. And it sounds nerdy and football junky of me to say this, but one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to seeing how it's used this year across the entire league is how the Ravens use Tyler Linderbaum, because I did not think he was a scheme fit. This is traditionally a gap-heavy offense, and that means oftentimes you want that center to be able to really hold his own against nose tackles. And that's not really Tyler Linderbaum's game, right? At Iowa, he ran that wide zone, athletic, move blocking scheme, and that's where he's at his best. So do we see this team go with more zone? And do we see them really get creative with him in the power run game, where maybe you're asking a tight end or someone else to come back and down block, and you're getting him as a lead blocker. And they actually did some of this stuff with Bradley Bozeman. But now with Tyler Linderbaum as that blocker on the move, it's very similar to Jason Kelce in Philadelphia, where they have not always been a zone scheme. He can get on the move and run some of those pin and pull, sweeping outside run types of stuff. I can't wait to see how this team and how Greg Roman deploys Tyler Linderbaum in the run game. But pound for pound, one of the best players in last year's draft, even though he's a little bit undersized and plays a position at center that's not traditionally the most valuable in the league. I think he's going to be a stud here. Then at right guard, you have Kevin Zeitler, who's a rock, really good right guard still at this stage in his career. Not the best athlete. We've seen his ability to drive and run block taper off over the years, but still an incredibly sound pass protector, someone you don't have to worry about, reliable from a health perspective, and he should be good to go for another year. And then I love the Morgan Moses signing. One of the best free agent value signings across the league at any position. Morgan Moses has been a solid starting offensive tackle for a long time in this league, and he hasn't always gotten credit for it, and I think his contract would back that statement up. But another good year for the Jets last year, and that was in a wide zone offense that he's not even necessarily the best fit. Now in more of a gap, power run game, and you think back to what this team had in Orlando Brown, Morgan Moses is 95% the same player that Orlando Brown was, except for he's not going to hold out and demand a trade and, hold your franchise, behind the barrel of a gun to get as much money as possible. In fact, the opposite. You're getting Morgan Moses for a fifth of the money that Orlando Brown wants. So, 3-year deal for him. Oh, and guess what? They took a freaky right tackle in Daniel Falele in the 4th round who has unbelievable developmental upside, who's not ready to play right now, to sit and learn and eventually, hopefully, start at right tackle. And you're really running 8 deep already of a really good offensive line there. And that's before we mention Patrick McCarry, who honestly is this team's swing tackle in a lot of ways, or at least swing lineman. He can literally play all 5 positions and do them well. Not the best athlete, a much better pass protector than he is a run blocker for that reason, but to have him as just another piece on this offensive line, what a luxury. So yeah, you're a little bit worried about Ronnie Stanley potentially getting back and staying healthy. Beyond him, you don't have any superstars here, but this is a really well-balanced offensive line that I think is much more anti-fragile this year with the depth and flexibility that they have. And we didn't even mention Tristan Colon either, who stepped in and played pretty well at center for them. If they keep 10, I would imagine he's the 10th that they keep. So really no worries about this offensive line, and it's kind of a top 10-ish group for me. And I also think this is arguably the best or maybe second best group of skill blockers in the league. I already alluded to Mark Andrews and the strides he's taken as a blocking tight end. You then have Nick Boyle, who is, hopefully someone that can stay healthy. He's really had a hard time doing that the last couple of years, but he's one of the 3 best blocking tight ends in the league, if not the best, if he can get back fully healthy. And then Patrick Ricard might be the best blocking fullback in the league. It's weird. He's 295 pounds, but he's honestly an average athlete for a fullback, despite being so big. He's also like a part-time defensive tackle for them. But I've never really seen a fullback, honestly, at least in the modern NFL, that so consistently wins his block. Like even Kyle Juszczyk, who's probably the second best in the league, there's an argument there. But there's something about Patrick Ricard. Maybe it's his size, and he just has this engulfing width about him that he hits his gap and he's able to just absorb his man. But he has an awareness about him where he is so consistently blocking the right guy, and he has great technique to stick and latch. He's a real weapon for this run game, you guys. And him paired with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle honestly boost their run block rating up 2 or 3 spots overall. So they have the best trio there, in my opinion, of dominant run block weapons, and that's a big part of why they're going to live in 12 and 13 personnel, right? Rashad Bateman, I think, can even get better if he can really buy into that run block aspect, like a little bit more of how he did at Minnesota. I think he's going to be a real weapon there. And Devin Duvernay is a really good run blocker as well. He might be a slot guy, but he's not small. He's built like a running back, and he'll get in your face. So they have a really dominant group of run block skill players that all plays into this scheme. And man, we haven't even talked about the running backs yet. So these guys missed last season. This was their game plan last year, right? They wanted J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and to be one of the most dominant run games in the league, and they had to pivot from that. A lot of expectations for J.K. Dobbins heading into year 2 last year, all the same this year heading into year 3. And I'm not going to act like I was the biggest J.K. Dobbins fan, but I see the explosiveness. I think he's got good vision. He's got enough power. He has some of that long speed and shiftiness to grow and become a really good running back in this league. Looked really good as a rookie and showed a lot of those flashes early on. But I guess what I'm saying here is it's not going to be all him. They really like Gus Edwards. I really like Gus Edwards. And the biggest, I guess, what's, for lack of a better term, issue with the read option, at least for defenses, is if you have to stay honest to a running back that will dominate 6-7 yards up the middle every single time, it really provides some problems for defenses, because you look at a Lamar Jackson and some defenses will say, all right, we're going to start spreading things out a little bit, and we're going to have our defensive end. He'll sit and he'll go to the he'll go to the quarterback. Well, when they had Mark Ingram in 2019, who was one of the best, just pick a lane, get you 6-7 yards consistently, it was a huge problem. And they haven't had that since Mark Ingram regressed and was eventually let go here. But they have had that with Gus Edwards, who missed last season, right? So he's going to be a major part of the run game. I think this is pretty much a 50-50 split. And honestly, his acceleration and his consistency between the tackles, I actually think he's currently a better running back than J.K. Dobbins ever so slightly. Now, Dobbins provides a little bit more speed and excitement, and you look at Linderbaum coming in and some of the outside run stuff that they'll run and inverted reads, right? Where Lamar is actually the inside threat and the running back is the outside threat. The creativity that they're going to have, that's where J.K. Dobbins can really blow up here. So a very diverse group here, really good duo where you might not have an elite player in place here, but it's a hell of a lot better last year where you had the corpse of Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell and Latavius Murray. Like, this is just a younger, more explosive, exciting group than they had last year that can open up this run game and allow them. We spend so much time talking about the importance of them staying in this scheme and doing what they want to do, living in 12 personnel and play action. Well, having better running backs here is going to allow them to do that by keeping the downs in shorter down and distance situations, by forcing defenses to be more afraid of the running backs on those read options, and ultimately opening up things over the top off of play action. So it all plays together, right? And having good running backs here is a big part of that. They've got him back. So that's another just huge piece for my optimism for this team and why they ranked 7th and why I'm higher on this team and all that. You have Mike Davis, who's a good backup to have. We might see more of him on earlier in the year as they maybe ease J.K. Dobbins in, getting back from that injury still. We mentioned Tyler Beatty as more of the receiving back here. I think that's more of a competition between Beatty and Hill. I don't know if they keep more than 4 here. So there's your running back room. I don't feel like I need to mention any more about Lamar Jackson and the QB run multiplier, but you see it again there, 10%, and still really good with Tyler Huntley, though he's not Lamar Jackson. So what does this all mean? Where do they rank offensively? Well, I have them 10th overall for offense, which might sound high, but when they're able to live in the type of offense that they want to run, I think they've added enough pieces here and gotten enough guys back healthy that they will legitimately be one of the 5 to 6 best offenses and the most difficult offenses to defend when they can stay in that style of offense. And that's exactly what they were in 2019, where they were maybe the best offense in the league. If not best, they were second or third, right? So it's not crazy to say they can be a top 10 offense and get back to that. Now, they're first for run game ranking. They're 15th for pass game. And some of those weaknesses as far as wide receiver depth and Lamar's, let's just say, lack of eliteness in the drop back pass game, that's where you might drop them down compared to some of these other better teams. And there will be certain game scripts where their passing game maybe looks like the 25th best passing game in the league. But I think more often than not, this is going to be a very functional passing game, especially over the middle of the field, that is the perfect complement to everything they do in the run game, where I have them as the best run game in the entire league, 10th overall for offense, and I think they could even be a little bit better than that. So we are now going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball. And this defense is going to bear just as much of a burden as far as keeping the game script in line with what the Ravens want to do. If this defense can't get better, then they're going to have to go to more traditional drop back passing game and play keep up and run the ball less. So it's just as important that this group can hold up their end of the bargain. So let's start with the defensive line, where they actually rank 24th for pass rush, but third in terms of run defense. So pass rush might be an area, where it's not a true strength for this team, and both could hurt this team's ability to slow down a Mahomes and Josh Allen and keep that score down and allow them to play in that game script that they want. But also, if things get out of hand and you get into these shootouts, things could get even exponentially more ugly because they don't have some great pass rush. Yet, there is some upside with this group that could change that. But as we sit here right now, I don't think this team has a dominant go-to rusher, and that kind of holds this group back. It is a decent group collectively, but it's not some massive strength for this team. So starting on the edge, it's really a three-man rotation, and that starts with Odafe Oweh, who he is not so much going to be the rotation. He's going to be this team's true number one. I don't think he is himself a true number one pass rusher relative to the rest of the league. Now, he really impressed me. He dramatically outplayed what I thought he would be as a rookie. I thought he was a true, like, raw developmental traits-based prospect. I think my pro comp for him was Josh Sweat, who was a third-round pick for the Eagles and took years to become a solid pass rusher for Philly. And Oweh really impressed me as far as gaining functional play strength. I thought he looked bigger from day one, and that could be something that happens again this year, where he continues to add more and more power, something I didn't think he had a whole lot of at Penn State. But he has a functional long-arm bull rush, and he uses his length and speed and get off really well to be that threat around the edge. Now, I think he's just getting started. He's a really good player now, and he's a really good run defender as well because of those physical tools and the effort that he brings. But if he can continue with this coaching staff and a team that's been the best of the best as far as developing players at this position, if he can continue to grow and work on his pass rush tool belt and get even more stronger, like, the sky is the limit for Odafe Oweh. We saw a lot of those big flashes last year. So there is a world where he grows, and you can look at this group and say they have more of a true number one rusher. I just don't think they have that right now, week one. So there's some upside right there. And then opposite of him is going to be more of that rotation between Tyus Bowser and Justin Houston. And Bowser's kind of a true hybrid edge, and he's really improved as a pass rusher, but where he adds his most value is going to be that athleticism and the do-it-all approach from that outside backer position. So he can defend the run pretty well. He's a little bit lighter, so he can get moved, but pretty good there. He can drop into coverage. So if you're going base 3-4, you can mix up your coverage fronts and bluff him and do some different stuff there. And then as a pass rusher, like I said, he's improved there. He's got a great first step. He's got a lot of bend. I think he's improved as far as his inside moves and using his hands. So he's another kind of functional, good number two pass rusher, but not a number one. And I don't think he's going to get a whole lot better than he is right now, just because he doesn't have the best length or speed or physical tools, strength being another aspect there. So that's where you do bring in Justin Houston on the opposite side of Odafe Owe for a lot more of those traditional pass rush downs. Now, Houston can still defend the run, but they don't ask him to do that. The guy's like 80 years old at this point, but he still gets after the quarterback at a pretty decent clip. And you can make a case that on a per snap basis, he's their best pass rusher off the edge. But again, the snap count's going to be a little bit lower for him. He's going to be on more of that pitch count. But we're pretty familiar with Justin Houston at this point. At a point in time, was one of the best edge players in the entire league. Still has an aspect of that explosiveness. But his technique, his persistence, and ability to get after the quarterback is still very much there. So he is another solid number 2 piece off the edge. But overall, I will just reiterate, a lack of a true number 1, unless Odafe Owe proves otherwise. Or maybe, and this is a very small likelihood at least for this year, David Ojabo comes in and tears things up. Now, I'm remarkably optimistic for David Ojabo's future. Second-round pick here, who easily would have been a first-round pick if he didn't tear his Achilles in his pro day. And reports are he's going to be able to get out there at some point this year, and that was kind of a hidden hope for the Ravens, is that as they get into the playoffs and they get down the stretch, David Ojabo can become a true third-down pass rush specialist, which is actually a great role for him to develop early on. Now, I have no idea what that timeline is going to be. I don't know if he plays in October or if it's not till week 16. But I do know that he can rush the passer. And he played with McDonald at Michigan. So someone he's very familiar with, very comfortable that he's going to put in the right work to rehab that ankle, and beyond that to continue developing and work at his craft and honestly put on a little bit more weight and maybe become a better run defender at the next level, because that was a big knock on him coming out. But as far as raw athletic tools, David Ojabo is at the top of the list when it comes to draft prospects. He's 6'5", he has length, he has an awesome first step and get off, he has quickness for inside moves, he has speed to threaten around the edge, but he also showed flashes of being able to convert that speed and length into power. And he even has the early flashes of a pass rushing skill set with a swim move and a spin move. So seriously, between him and Owe, you have 2 athletic specimens, 2 guys that, by the way, were high school teammates and are like best friends, that could grow into, and I don't put this lightly, the best pass rush duo in the NFL. It doesn't seem likely that happens this year. It feels like Owe is going to continue gradually getting better, and he's going to maybe by year's end be maybe a low-end one. I don't see him being a dominant like defensive player of the year type of edge rusher this year. Maybe by next year, potentially. And then you'll rotate Bowser and Houston and maybe get some flashes from Ojabo this year with some optimism heading into next year. But yeah, it's as you can see, some limits on that edge group as far as at least as far as like stacking them up against the rest of the league. You have some other rotational pieces. Steven Means comes over from Atlanta. He'll play his role at least before Ojabo gets back. He's kind of an early down rep eater, if you will, familiar with, I can't say the system because it could look different, but he's played in the Dean Pease defense in Atlanta. So there's going to be some familiarity there at least with this Ravens staff. And then Dalen Hayes, didn't get to see much of him last year, but I also always saw him as kind of a rotational kind of down eater who can defend the run, but not much of a pass rusher. So that's probably your edge group. And then the interior defensive line's really good, but again, no like dominant pass rushers there either. Much better in run defense from that interior group, especially when you look at Michael Pierce coming back as a nose tackle. He is a true nose tackle. Now, he is one of the better nose tackles at rushing the passer. As far as true nose tackles go, this guy's like 340, 350 pounds. He has a good first step, and that allows him to bring some of that power, but you're still not talking about a super consistent pass rusher and someone that they will take off the field on pass rush downs. Then you have Calais Campbell, who's going to play a little bit of 4-eye, a little bit of 3-tech, maybe even a little bit of edge, depending on the system that they want to run. But he is definitely regressing. I want to say he'll be 37 this year, but still a very physical, freaky player as far as size goes. He's 6'8", and his length is such a weapon for him. It's almost like offensive linemen don't really know how to block him. A lot of guys are tall, but they aren't able to play low and use that arm length to their best advantage. Campbell's the opposite. He's able to maintain good pad level and extend those arms to the point where he can basically control his man in a one-on-one situation. So he's still a dominant run defender, but from a pass rush perspective, that quickness starting to taper off a little bit, that get-off starting to taper off a little bit, which hurts his power. And just in general, I think he's a better pass rusher from the edge than he is from the interior, and he's always shown that throughout his career. So scheme fit-wise, if they go 3-4 front here or use him as a 3 technique on passing downs, which I expect them to do, he's not quite as good as he was, say, in that 4-3 defense for Jacksonville. But still a very good player in both regards. Then you have Justin Madubuike, who honestly didn't take the steps last year that I thought he would have in year 2. Still has a lot of potential, a really good athlete, a leader for this defense, and someone that I just have so much faith in the Ravens to develop someone like him that's kind of a well-rounded, do-it-all defensive tackle with all of the tools. I still have the faith in him to become a better player than he's shown to be, which to this point has been kind of a below-average starting caliber defensive tackle. So I will put the up arrow next to him as far as more potential than he's shown, but it's kind of a wishy-washy deal where year 3, I don't know if we're expecting it at this point. But I do like him as a player. Then they draft Travis Jones in the 3rd round, and he's going to be a really nice piece here because I think he can honestly play at least 2 positions with replacing Madubuike in rotation and replacing Michael Pierce, of course, at nose because Travis Jones is a big nose tackle type. But he even showed some quickness at his size to be able to rush the passer and stretch out to a 3 technique, whereas I think he can also come in relief of Calais Campbell. So someone that had no business falling into the 3rd round. I could not believe it that he got out of the 2nd. I thought there was teams even in the 1st round that could have considered him, showing good flashes in the preseason already. To me, he is going to be a long-term quality starter for them, if not more. He is an underrated athlete given the fact that he is so big. He has quickness to use as a pass rusher, both as far as getting a first step for a power rush, but also being able to change lanes and show some like a swim move and stuff. So he's not just a really good run defender, which he is. He has some upside as a pass rusher as well. So he's a really nice 4th piece to have, and especially as a run defender, he's going to allow them to really always have a good run defender out there, whatever rotation they want to go with. Then you're getting into true role players. Broderick Washington, honestly to me, just a backup and partial rotational player for Justin Madubuike. Similar physical builds there. Showed some good stuff in run defense last year, so he's fine. And then they bring in Brent Urban. Makes a ton of sense as a replacement backup for Calais Campbell. Veteran dude, also like 6'7", has always been able to use that length and size to his best advantage as a run defender. So injury insurance, early down rotational insurance for Calais Campbell there in Brent Urban. And honestly, that might be as deep as they run. With the rest of the guys, not a whole lot there with Mack, Crawford, and Nichols. I will say Nichols was an ultra-productive player at Stephen F. Austin. Didn't test that well. Probably going to have a hard time transitioning, but did blow it up at Stephen F. Austin. And I think anyone that went there for school, watched him play, would be remiss if I didn't mention his name at least. So it's a deep defensive line. It's a physical defensive line. But I don't know if from a pass rush perspective, this is going to be a real strength of this team. They do have some excellent upside down the road, though, with Owe and Ojabo. And then another area that is likely to be a weakness for this team is the linebacker room. Now, the Ravens, a smart, forward-looking organization, they realize if you're going to have a weakness on your defense, you might as well have it be your linebackers, which is the easiest position to exploit, and the position that consistently makes the least amount of impact on the game. And you couldn't have any more of a polarizing, basically different duo here. Patrick Queen, who's an ultra athlete, really undersized, more safety than linebacker, honestly, cannot hang against the run, not just with his size, like he will get blown up in the run game, but he's over-aggressive, he overshoots lanes, he misses like 20% of his tackles. He's not a good linebacker, man. He really is not, but because of his play style and his athleticism, there will be splash plays there, whether it's interceptions or tackles for loss. So to put him next to a Josh Bynes, who is a remarkably disciplined, full-sized, experienced linebacker who's going to keep everything in front of him, not blow his lane, and maintain discipline, at least it makes sense to put Patrick Queen next to Josh Bynes, who I think is a better overall player, even if you get bigger splashes and a Patrick Queen highlight reel might look better than a Josh Bynes one. I will say it makes sense to put these two guys together. So it's enough to give them like an adequate group. They rank 23rd for me in coverage, 19th in terms of run defense, because Josh Bynes is genuinely a pretty good run defending linebacker, enough to compensate for some of Patrick Queen's over-aggressiveness and lack of size. But yeah, it's a group that I think can be attacked in certain situations, but for the most part shouldn't destroy this defense. It's really hard for a linebacking group to ruin a defense. It is the least important position on the defense by far. As far as the depth goes, Malik Harrison is someone to keep an eye on. He's kind of the hopeful Josh Bynes replacement. They really didn't invest in this group, and I think they still believe in Malik Harrison to be that full-sized, complementary kind of run-defending complement to Patrick Queen. And like I said, having a good preseason, was a third-round pick, and someone that I really thought would have come along by now, but still not going to give up on him. Really good downhill player with a lot of size and physicality. So someone to keep an eye on as a backup, as a potential replacement for Josh Bynes. Still, it's a position that is hard to learn and I think does just take some time. So he's a nice third guy to have, I suppose. And then it's really just a bunch of undrafted types. Christian Welch, a smart player out of Iowa. Zacoby McClain, kind of a full speed ahead, heavy hitting type out of Auburn. And then Josh Ross comes over from Michigan, was actually the lowest rated player I had out of 338 prospects on my draft board. Just undersized and unathletic. I don't see if he's gonna. I don't believe he's gonna be able to make it in the NFL. And then Diego Fagot as well. Going to be a competition for a fourth or maybe fifth linebacker spot there. But yeah, not the most exciting linebacker room in the league. But the secondary, on the other hand, is where the strength of this defense is. They rank 4th for me for DB coverage, 12th for DB run defense, so really good in both regards, especially from a coverage perspective. You got your true number one corner in Marlon Humphrey. Can be a little bit aggressive, a little bit grabby at times, but that's really the only knock on him. And he's a really good corner. Easily a top 10 guy. I think closer to 5 than 10. But in general, a superstar corner, lock him down at number 1. And one thing that's really noteworthy about Marlon Humphrey is he's probably behind Darius Leonard for the best peanut punch ability to pinpoint the ball. And it doesn't just help him force fumbles, where he's going to give you like 6 forced fumbles a year, which is crazy. But it really helps him break up passes as well, because before the receiver's able to secure it, he's able to pinpoint that thing, and you will see him targeting those punch-outs. So he's very good at that. And then Marcus Peters, opposite of that. Go back to what I said about Trayvon Diggs. Marcus Peters is like the best case career trajectory for Trayvon Diggs, where he's put in a situation where he can be a team's number 2 corner and allow him to be himself inside that defense, where because he's the number 2, he's drawing easier coverage assignments, not having to follow the other team's number 1. So his coverage is by nature going to be tighter. But he's also going to likely see more targets because the other corner is someone that the quarterbacks are going to look away from. And with a player like Marcus Peters or Trayvon Diggs, really instinctive, risk-taking corners with ball skills, and because of those added opportunities, are going to take the ball away at a really consistent level, which is not easy to do consistently. But in those circumstances, they're in the perfect spot. So Marcus Peters is no different, except unlike Trayvon Diggs, who's asked to be their team's number 1 corner, Marcus Peters is this team's number 2. So he's almost a dream fit as a number 2 corner. And obviously getting him back after he didn't play at all last year is a huge boost to this defense. And then beyond him, you do start to have some question marks. I'm not terribly worried about it, but they're kind of non-strengths, if you will. So they signed Kyle Fuller, who's on the other side of 30 now, really struggled in a defense that he's theoretically supposed to really succeed in Vic Fangio's off-man, quarters-heavy defense. Now, I think going to be asked to play a little bit more of a true nickel role. It's kind of funny how him and his brother Kendall have had reverse career trajectories. Kendall started in the nickel, now one of the better perimeter corners out there. Maybe not one of the better, but a really good perimeter corner. Kyle Fuller, getting up there in age, might be asked to slide more into the nickel. Now, it's not going to be a direct nickel assignment for him because Marlon Humphrey is actually really good from the slot as well. That's another benefit that he brings. But I do think we see maybe 50-50 there. And I think we've seen it a lot. Aging corners, maybe the long speed starting to drop off, able to slide into the nickel and kind of rekindle their career, if you will. So I'm not worried about Kyle Fuller, but he's not what he once was. I think he's a solid starting corner, and I'm not expecting a whole lot more than that. Then you have Brandon Stevens, was drafted last year, a remarkable athlete that really just didn't know what he was doing coming into the league, and they actually had him play a lot of safety last year. It seems, with the depth they have at safety now, that they're going to ask him to go back to his natural position at corner, where he will basically resume as project depth. Now, obviously, it's nice to have that experience at safety, and it does provide some positional depth and flexibility as well. But with his physical profile, he better projects as a potential starter on the outside. And then you kind of pair him with Jalen Armour-Davis. Loved this draft pick. Was a top 10 corner in this class for me. For them to get him when they did was a bargain, and especially for Baltimore that's had so much success with Alabama players and these D-backs. I think Jalen Armour-Davis is going to be the Marcus Peters replacement, maybe in a year. He's a really talented player. And what was interesting about Jalen Armour-Davis is no one was talking about him. You've got this lengthy corner with pretty good press man technique, a pretty disciplined player who showed yearly development, declared as a underclassman out of Alabama, and no one really mentioned him. And he falls in the draft to the 4th round. I thought he was a 3rd-round guy through and through. So definitely someone to keep an eye on, not just as a long-term maybe replacement for for Marcus Peters, but if you have injury, I think his experience in the SEC at Alabama could make him a good dime corner and maybe someone that can fill in the event of injury to start and be a surprisingly good rookie. His tape wasn't bad. There really wasn't a lot of downs on his tape. There just wasn't a ton of big plays or highlight coverage either. So I like Jalen Armour-Davis. Demarion Williams, I wasn't quite as high on. I had him as more of a day 3 sort of someone that's played a lot of football, that can play safety, corner, a physical run defender, but probably not someone that has starting corner upside, maybe in the slot, but at least as a special teamer in depth, I can see maybe why they liked him. And then you got some veterans, Kevin Seymour, Darryl Worley. They might hold on to one of these guys and keep 7 corners with Stevens as kind of a safety hybrid, just so they have another veteran presence in there, because the rest of them are kind of project types. But that'll probably be your secondary, or your cornerback group, rather. And then you get to the safeties. Obviously huge to add Marcus Williams into the mix here. And I mostly expect him to be used, as he was in New Orleans, as that true free safety center fielder type, where he's one of the 3 best center fielding free safeties in the league. Just speed, range, ability to read the quarterback's eyes, and arrive in a hurry. Good tackler coming downhill, can play physical around the box, but that's not his biggest strength. You just want him over the top as the true definition of the word safety, where he can thrive in this defense. Was paid a lot of money to step in and be one of the best free safeties in the game. I think that's exactly what he's going to do. Then you have Chuck Clark, who I do fully expect to be this team's starting strong safety in base packages, but I think you're going to see a ton of kind of base dime, where Kyle Hamilton is more of a linebacker. And perhaps that's a situation where he can, I guess, remediate some of your issues at linebacker, if you will. Similar to what we did with the Patriots deep dive, talking about Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips. We still need to see how he's utilized and how much he's played, but that could very much be a situation like that, where he's more linebacker than safety. But I do still think Chuck Clark is the better cover player from a safety position right now. Hamilton can get there, but I really do expect both these guys to get a lot of playing time, but Chuck Clark to be the quote-unquote starter at safety. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm projecting. So with Chuck Clark there, that's going to be more of your free safety, strong safety relationship. With Marcus Williams at free, Clark being much better around the box. And he's a excellent run defending safety. And I think that's another big reason he edges out Kyle Hamilton, just because Hamilton is a rookie and had some hiccups in run defense at Notre Dame, despite the flash plays he's able to make. But yeah, he's physical. He'll man up tight ends. He's good in hook zones. He has some zone IQ, and like he's not a horrible coverage player, but you just don't want him matched up on really good athletes, and you definitely don't want him playing over the top with asking him to have a lot of range and that kind of stuff. So he's a traditional strong safety, not the highest upside, but a pretty good player. And then we'll talk a little bit more about Kyle Hamilton here, who, like I said, is going to be used as a sixth defensive back in dime packages. And also just as another linebacker, they might take Patrick Queen off the field, but it's probably going to be taking Josh Bynes off the field. Say it's like 2nd and 8, and they want to run a dime package with one linebacker, while Kyle Hamilton's actually your second linebacker. So like he provides a lot of that flexibility, but I do expect him to get starting snaps here, even if he's not listed as the starting strong safety. And Hamilton is very similar to Jaron Kearse for the Dallas Cowboys. And I'll credit Brett Coleman for putting that comp out there. I don't want to rob Brett. He definitely pointed that out, but it couldn't be any more accurate. Like he's not a great athlete. He really isn't. He is legitimate 4.65, maybe 4.7 speed. He's got like long legs. He can eat up space in a hurry. That's where you see him from a 2-high shell show some range, which is good to know it's in there. But as far as like functional athleticism, changing direction, and being a good like man safety on wide receivers, or even playing up top as a free safety, those are things that I don't want Kyle Hamilton doing. What I want him doing is living off the wing, playing weak side backer, running man coverage on tight ends who also have some of those fluidity issues in their hips, aren't going to burn him over the top with speed like a slot receiver might. And then he can be used in hook zones as well, where he's really good at reading the quarterback's eyes and making plays on the ball, where I compared him to Spider-Man on my draft board, because he's got these ridiculously long arms, and his height and his length, he casts webs over the middle of the field. So as a blitzer, to jump up and bat balls, coming down into a hook zone where he can just barely reach out and bat a pass, like he is just a nuisance hybrid defender, but he's not a safety. I really don't think he's a high coverage safety. So that's why I think they go with Chuck Clark, who can go too high, at least a little bit better than Kyle Hamilton, can man up receivers a little bit better than Kyle Hamilton, and use Kyle Hamilton as basically a box safety, nickel linebacker, whatever you want to call it. But in that role, I think he's going to be really good. And that's why I like the landing spot with the Ravens, where they're going to be smart enough to use him in that role. This team was one of the early innovators, getting a guy like Anthony Levine to play a role like that. Well, Kyle Hamilton is 3 times the player Anthony Levine is in that role. So in that specific skill set, I see why they liked him. I see why they drafted him where they did. And he's going to be a playmaker for him, even if he has his issues in coverage. I mentioned as a run defender, he can take bad angles and have some issues there, but he can grow there and turn into a really unique defensive weapon. Will he ever be a true starting safety? I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But in the modern NFL, he's a starting defensive player. So there's my Kyle Hamilton rant. As far as the rest of the safety depth goes, Tony Jefferson's a true backup to Chuck Clark. Can do a little bit of the Kyle Hamilton stuff if he goes down, but a veteran, strong safety at this point. Geno Stone's interesting to me. Never should have fallen as late as he did, in my opinion. Iowa has such a great track record of producing smart, athletic defensive backs. He's got size. He's not the fastest player, but very Chuck Clark-esque. Good to see him sticking around. I think he was on the practice squad at one point, but he ended up getting out there last year and showed some nice stuff. He could be a good backup. You still have Ardarius Washington here as well, who's really undersized, really slow. If he was in the body of a more athletic defensive back who wasn't 5'8", he would probably be a starter in the NFL, but he's got those physical limitations, unfortunately. So, 4th for defensive back coverage, 12th for run defense, and all of this is ultimately going to give us the 8th ranked defense. Of course, a big part of that is that 5th ranked defensive coaching in the league. The Ravens are always so well disciplined, so physically minded, and just coach that side of the ball so well. It's basically built into the identity of this team. So that's a booster here. But 9th for pass defense with some potential questions about that pass rush and linebacking group, but overall really good. And then the run defense is 6th in the league. They're going to be really tough up front, get enough support from the back end, and a coaching staff that I trust to basically not put these guys in compromising situations against the run. And that even includes their biggest weakness in like Patrick Queen, at least as far as run defense goes. But let's tie a ribbon on this thing. So obviously they rank 7th overall. They are going to be tier 1 as far as special teams goes. In elite special teams, you have the best kicker of all time, Justin Tucker. Man's a machine. He's one of the few kickers in the league that you can, year in, year out, basically guarantee you're getting not just a top 3 kicker, but the best kicker with accuracy, range, clutch, you name it. Not to mention John Harbaugh is technically like the best special teams coordinator in the league. They do such a good job of empowering these guys to make an impact on special teams, earn a name for themselves through that side of the ball. It is part of the culture there. It's what they do. They perennially have probably the best special teams in the league, and it's an asset for this team. This is truly one of the most unique teams in the league. It is the most unique team in the league. They play football a different way, and if they can drag you into the mud and do this the way they want to do it, you're more often than not going to come out bruised and broken and probably losing. So that's really what the Ravens 2022 season and beyond is going to be about here. But let's wrap this thing up by taking a look at this team's schedule and what I'm predicting for this team, or at least what I'm projecting for them. I will remind you guys that I'm going to do a final season predictions video, whereas these are more projections. So I will kind of put my money where my mouth is and lay out my official win predictions for every team, along with playoffs and all that stuff. So make sure you subscribe so you do not miss that when we get there in just about 10 days or so here. But back to the Ravens' schedule. Their over-under is 9.5 wins, which is basically where most of these last few teams have been in the AFC, where it's a lot of tough games. Their Super Bowl odds are a little bit higher than the Bengals, by the way, so maybe justifying having them over the Bengals a little bit there, just based on what the desert has. And honestly, their over pays garbage right now, just minus 166. So there's a lot of money on the Ravens winning 10-plus games this year. And when you look at their schedule, it makes a lot of sense. I actually have them with 7 likely wins, which is, we haven't had that many likely wins for a lot of these teams here in these recent deep dives. So, at the Jets to start the year, probably without Zach Wilson. You got Tua coming to town. You're at the Giants. You got Cleveland at home before Watson's reinstated. Carolina at home, at Jacksonville, and then Atlanta at home. That's a good baseline of probably 6 wins there for the Ravens. And then it's really just a matter of basically splitting against your division if possible, which can get you to 8 or 9 wins. And then tough out some other difficult games, whether that's at New England, at Tampa Bay, at New Orleans. I think it's fair to say they could win one of those, sprinkle in Buffalo and Denver, and win 2 out of those 5. That's pretty easily a 10-win team right there, if not more. So you can definitely see where people are looking at the schedule and saying, they got a pretty nice path here to 10 wins. I think they have the best schedule out of this division, which makes sense. They not only are they fortunate to get players back healthy, but because they had so many injuries last year, they get the last place schedule in an already difficult division. So, I like the over here. That said, I would not bet it at minus 166. I just think there's better, more profitable over-unders out there. But I do think they get over there at 10 wins. 11 might be pushing it, but even then, I think this could be an 11-win team this year, which could be good in the AFC for like a 2-seed or a 3-seed with how much these guys are going to beat up on each other. And then you're looking at, a team that if you can get hot and healthy into the playoffs with home games, 18 point, basically 19-1 to win the Super Bowl. I don't mind a Super Bowl bet on the Ravens. So this is clearly a team I'm high on, a team I'm excited to watch. Really hope you guys enjoyed the deep dive. I'm sorry my voice sounds like shit. Fighting through this cold. But that was a long one. It was a really fun one. I hope you enjoyed. Do drop a comment down below. Is this too high, too low? Did I convince you on the Ravens here at 7? You think this rating is just fine? Make sure you hit that like button as well. It really helps me out. And we'll see you guys in just a couple days for our next deep dive. Peace out.